Hello, everyone. Welcome to the space. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us today for another NAVH workshop. Today, we are going to cover the topic on using snaps to add a non-EVM chain to MetaMask. Uh, so, for those of you working on the snaps bounty, this would be a very useful workshop for all of you. And even if you're not working on a Snaps bounty, this would be a very good insight into one of Consensus products, which is called MetaMask Snaps. So for today, I'm very proud to have with me Ziad from the Consensus team to be taking you guys through this workshop. So let's all welcome Ziad to take the stage and begin the session. But before that, I'm just going to put a disclaimer out there that this workshop will be recorded. So not to worry if, let's say, you miss anything while Ziad is sharing. You can always refer back to the recording that will be posted up onto your builder's guide in the resources page after the workshop and it will be up the next day. So just keep a lookout on our hackathon Discord for the update on this. All right. So without further ado, um, let's welcome Ziad to the stage.
Right. GM, hi everyone, and welcome to another MetaMask Snaps workshop. I'm really glad to have you here with me. If you were here on Tuesday for my other Snaps workshop, there might be a little of overlap in the beginning. I think it's going to be useful anyway because it's good to be exposed to the same information more than once. It doesn't hurt. But very quickly, we're going to dive into something uh, something really exciting today. Uh, we're gonna be adding Dogecoin into MetaMask. So that's gonna be really fun, right? If you're using MetaMask today, you know you can control your Ethereum assets or other EVM compatible chains. But with MetaMask Snaps, one of the very exciting features that you'll be able to develop as a blockchain developer is to add new protocols to Snaps. So we're going to start with a quick presentation just to get a little bit of insight into what Snaps is. And then we're going to dive right into a little demo and then some coding. Before we start, I want to mention, even though this is being presented to you as a workshop, everything that we're going to be covering today is nicely it's all laid out in a GitHub repository that I'm going to be sharing with you. So if you don't have like two monitors where, I don't know, or you can have one monitor following what I'm doing and then trying to do everything at the same time, you don't have to. First off, like we said earlier, the workshop is being recorded, but also the GitHub repository that I'm going to be sharing with you has everything laid out so you can just go and do it on your own. So while I don't mean to want to tell you how you should follow this workshop because everyone learns in their own style and at their own pace, what you can do is you can just listen, you can ask questions, and then you can take the material with you and work with it on your own time. All right. So that being said, I'm going to share my screen. There's going to be a few seconds of inception as I share my screen because my screen sharing is sharing its own screen. And I'm going to move on to a quick presentation. It's going to be only a few minutes, and then we'll dive right in. So first off, for those who don't know me, my name is Ziad Sab, and I'm coming to you here today in the role of the developer advocate for MetaMask Snaps. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Telegram with @ZiadMTL. And I want you to find me. And I want you to link up with me if you're interested in Snaps, if you're working with Snaps.
Yep, I'm sorry. Your screen
Yes.
share is in reverse, like it's mirrored. Could
Oh,
you?
my screen share is mirrored. That's
Yeah,
interesting. Okay.
yeah. I
So
think
what can I do about that?
you can reshare it. Try to reshare it.
All right, let's do that. So I'm sharing my screen. I don't see any option for mirroring or anything, but I will do it again. Let me know if it's better now. Is it still mirrored?
No, it's fixed now. Yep, great.
It's fixed now. All
Yeah,
right, amazing. Thank you.
thank you.
So perfect. So I'm gonna continue where I left off. I was saying I want you to reach out to me, and now my Twitter and my Instagram names are not reversed anymore. So you won't reach out to my alter ego. And also, this is my GitHub where you're going to find today's workshop. I'm not putting the URL of the workshop because it's pinned at the top of my list of repositories on GitHub. So you're going to have easy access to it, and you'll be able to like redo it on your own, basically. So again, as the developer advocate of Snaps, I want you to reach out to me because that's my role and that's what I enjoy doing. I want to link up with developers who are interested in building on MetaMask. Actually, whether it's Snaps or our other products, I'll put you in touch with the right people if I can't answer your questions. And my role is to create good documentation, create tutorials, give workshops, go to conferences, link up with you guys, see what you're working on, see how I can help you. And we're going to be going through some parts of the documentation today as we go through the workshop. And currently, we are improving our documentation. That's one of the main things that I'm working on with the engineering team. And we need your feedback on that. So if you're building a snap and you're having trouble with the documentation or anything like that, then reach out to me either personally or through our Discord, which will be shared at the end of the workshop as well. And it will be my pleasure to help you with anything regarding MetaMask. So let's get started. What's MetaMask? MetaMask is an interface to interact with the blockchain. Currently, as of today, only Ethereum or EVM compatible blockchains. We have 35 plus million users using MetaMask, and MetaMask has stood the test of time. Of course, there were some hiccups along the way, some more serious than others, but as of today, it's the one wallet, the one extension wallet that you can use in your browser to access Web3, and that has stood the test of time. And want to go back a little bit on the 35 plus million users, because what it means for you if you're a Snaps developer is if you have a new protocol and you want to reach Web3 users, well, you can create a Snap, you can extend MetaMask to implement your profile, whether it's EVM compatible or not. And then from one day to the other, you have access to these dozens of millions of users of ours, and they become your users. So this is going to be very important for you. And like I've said probably a bunch of times before, Snaps is MetaMask's platform, a MetaMask extension platform, which allows you to add new features to MetaMask in a controlled and decentralized way. And we're going to see how that works throughout the workshop. And as the MetaMask team, we've used Snaps as one of the most important features for the future of MetaMask. The reason why is because there's no way that we could build everything, every protocol, every feature, every identity feature in-house. There's no way that we can do that. So with Snaps, we give you, the developer, the power to do that on your own. And while the first release of Snaps will be based on an allow list, which is controlled by us, the final goal of Snaps is that anyone can be developing a Snap and that it will be approved and vouched for by the community through some decentralized audits and through some decentralized schemes. And that we will simply be there to nurture the ecosystem, to add new features to Snaps, to make it more powerful, but really not be there to hold or prevent anyone from using Snaps. So what can you do with Snaps? Well, you can derive private keys, and you can do that securely inside of the sandbox of the MetaMask extension. Actually, inside another sandbox that's specific to your Snap. So the code that you write for your Snap is some JavaScript code, and it runs in a very, very secure sandbox that has very limited capabilities. And that allows you to derive private keys based on the user's wallet, the user's secret recovery phrase, in a secure way. You can do a lot of other things. You can store and manage data. If you're building a wallet like Dogecoin, you might want to keep track of addresses that you've generated and so on. So you can you have a space where you can store data that's encrypted, and that's also inside the Snap sandbox. You can add custom confirmation and transaction insights. So when the user is shown a normal MetaMask transaction window, you have the ability through Snaps to inject some UI in there that will show them some insights that maybe your company is privy to due to some data that you're gathering. Hey, for example, you're about to interact with a contract, and our database tells us that this address that you're about to interact to is known to be a malicious address. You can do even complex things like transaction simulations and show the user like, hey, if you go through this transaction, this is what's going to happen. This address will be debited this much funds, this address will gain this much funds, and so on and so on. So you can do really powerful things with that. And those are supported by some other support features such as cron jobs. You have the ability to run, to execute custom code on a timer, again inside the private sandbox of your Snap, and a custom UI, which is currently quite basic, but allows you to display some data inside the MetaMask UI in a secure way, such as I think private keys or something like that, and that we're always improving that custom UI. I mentioned earlier that we're working with Snaps today on an allow list that will be for the production version of MetaMask. But as of today, if you want to develop with Snaps without our permission, all you have to do is download and install the MetaMask Flask extension. And what is MetaMask Flask? Well, it's a canary or developer preview of MetaMask. And what that means is that it's built with some features that are currently not in the main extension. And one of those main features is Snaps. So even though we haven't even launched yet, you can use MetaMask Flask today. And that will give you access to start developing with Snaps. And we're going to be doing that together as part of this workshop. Prerequisites for developing with Snaps and for following this workshop, for being able to follow this workshop in a way that will be useful, I can say to you, is a basic understanding of JavaScript and React. I would even say TypeScript, because all the code that we write in the Snap and the template that we provide to you to create a Snap are based on TypeScript and React. You need to have MetaMask Flask installed. And one thing that I didn't mention earlier is that you can't run MetaMask Flask alongside the real the live production MetaMask extension. Why can't you do that? Because the way that these extensions expose features to a Dapp is through the window.ethereum global provider, and they will override each other. Depending on which one loads first, you will either get the live extension that provides its own Ethereum provider or the Flask extension. So you really want to make sure to either disable your live MetaMask extension or create a new browser profile. And in case it's not clear, I will mention it. I think some things are worth mentioning, even if they might seem straightforward. MetaMask Flask is an experimental build. There are a lot of experimental features in there, like Snaps. So don't use your same secret recovery phrase that you're using with your live MetaMask. Create another secret recovery phrase that you're going to be using only for Flask. And ideally, you're only going to be using that to transfer test funds. Just like we're doing today, we're going to be using the Dogecoin test network in order to do all our testing and all our demo. You want to be using Node.js, at least version 16, that you can install through NVM, the Node version manager. And finally, you need a use case for Snaps. I know if you're here following this workshop, you're probably really excited about Snaps, about extending MetaMask. It's really powerful. And you want to make sure that what you're building is actually a valid use case, that it's something that that you couldn't do without snaps, or that you couldn't do, let's say, with the same security without snaps, or with the same UI integration. And you can always reach out to us. We have a Discord that we're going to link to later. You can reach out to me again at ZiadMTL if you're thinking of something to build and you're not sure yet. It's a good way to already be in touch with us even before you get started. And those are pretty much all the prerequisites. So let's get going. I'm going to stop the presentation here because everything that follows we're going to be looking at live during the workshop. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a quick demo of what are we going to be building. So we're going to be building a Dogecoin wallet inside MetaMask snaps. And you can find the whole workshop on my GitHub, github.com/Ziad-Sab, and it's going to be pinned here. It's the Dogecoin snap tutorial. And I have it loaded up already in my browser, in my Chrome, where I have MetaMask Flask installed. And so this is, it looks like the regular MetaMask. One of the things that can tell you that it's Flask is that it has its own color. It's a purple pinkish icon. And under the settings, you also have a snaps section, which you don't have in the main extension. All right. So what we're looking at here is the development server that we give you when you use our template to start creating a snap. So for now, I'm just going to go through and show you what is the interaction that allows a user to install a snap and communicate with a snap. And after I do that, we're going to look at how to create this development server. We're going to start from scratch. It won't be a Dogecoin snap. It'll be a template snap. And then we'll start building it step by step. And we're going to learn quite a bunch of things. We're going to get quite a bunch of insights into some MetaMask snaps internals as we go along. So the first thing that I have to do if I want to be using a snap is my Dapp has to connect to the snap. So connecting to the snap is a two-part process. The first step is to install the snap in MetaMask. So the snap itself is installed only once. And then every Dapp that wants to use the snap in order to interact with its APIs and with its features then needs to connect with the snap. So I'm going to click connect. And I'm going to get a connection request here coming from the MetaMask extension. We're not going to go through the details of that right away because we're going to look at them a little bit more later. But I'm going to decide to accept the connection request. And then I'm going to be shown a screen where I'm going to be asked to install the snap. And here, I'm going to have an opportunity to see what are all the permissions that a snap needs in order to successfully do the work that it's offering to do. So in order for a Dogecoin snap to be able to work inside the MetaMask extension, it needs to control my test network accounts and assets. What that means is that it needs to be able to derive private keys for testnet, which is the coin type number 1, if I recall correctly. The snap needs to allow websites to communicate directly with it. This website here is going to be displaying some Dogecoin addresses, some Dogecoin balances, and so on. And it needs to get this information by communicating with some API. And it's not going to be a web API. It's going to be an API, a Snap API, an API that runs inside the MetaMask secure sandbox. Same thing, the Snap needs to access the internet. Why does it need to access the internet? Well, for one thing, it needs to broadcast transactions. So this Snap needs to be able to sign a transaction and then broadcast it on the Dogecoin testnet network. So it needs access to the internet. And the last permission that the Snap is requesting is to display dialog windows in MetaMask. Why? Because before you broadcast the transaction, when you do a regular Ethereum transaction, if you have a Dapp that wants to suggest a transaction to you, you get a pop-up that is asking you to confirm this transaction. You don't just want to let MetaMask send the transaction right away. Well, in some cases you do. Like, for example, if you're building account abstraction with session keys and you want to temporarily allow a wallet to send multiple transactions on your behalf, but in the general case, you want to display a confirmation. And so there's a permission that's required to display these dialog dialog windows in MetaMask. Why? Well, because they look like the MetaMask dialogues, and you want to have at least be mindful that this snap is going to be displaying some things in the MetaMask UI that look like it might be coming from MetaMask, but that in reality is coming from an external developer's code. So that's it. These are the permissions. I'm going to allow these permissions. And because the deriving private keys is a sensitive permission, there's like, we double down on the warnings, if you will, and we tell you, like, really, this snap is going to be able to have access to your test network private keys, and it also has access to the internet. So if it hasn't been well audited, then there's a chance that it might be leaking private keys, right? So we want to make sure that you're aware of that, and that you've done your due diligence, even though the developers of the snap are going to do their due diligence, are going to do an audit, are going to get approved, going to get vouched for by the community. This is serious stuff, like your private keys based on your MetaMask secret recovery phrase are now going to be able to be derived by this snap. So this is just for test networks, so I'm fine with that. I'm going to accept the additional permission, and then the snap is installed. Amazing. So right away, you see that as the snap got installed, the UI changed immediately. We give you some in the template that we give you to create a new snap. We give you basically two templates. We give you a template for the snap code, the secure code running inside the MetaMask sandbox, and we also give you a template for a Dapp, a companion Dapp we call it, that is going to be interacting with the snap. So at the moment, as of today, your Ethereum addresses, you see them right here in the MetaMask UI. But any addresses from third-party protocols that are being implemented with snaps, any signing features like showing balances or sending transactions, currently we don't have a deep integration into the MetaMask UI. Like there's not going to be a send button for a Dogecoin account here. Your Dogecoin account is not going to be listed here. We are working on that, but it's not going to be for today or tomorrow. So for now, the only thing that happens in the snap is the secure things, is the derivation of private keys and so on, the signing. But any other UI that has to interact with those features is going to be shown here in a Dapp, in a companion Dapp. So we give you a starter kit. It's based on Gatsby and React. You can feel free to use it or not. And in there's some logic, like when we click the connect button, we call a function called the request snaps on the Ethereum provider, and that allows you to request the connection with that snap. So it can still be useful, even though you're not going to use it right away. But I think for sure, as you're developing in the beginning and you just want to really concentrate on the snap itself, you have this UI that you can use to get you started, so that you're not just starting off with a blank page and have to like wire everything together. So for me, this made it really easy for me. While I was developing this workshop, I spent like about 80% of my time developing the snap part of things, and I only had to spend about 20% just copy pasting some of these boxes that are provided in the template, hooking everything up together, and let's continue with the demo now. So I just connected to the snap, and the snap shows me that I have a Dogecoin testnet address. So I'm going to copy this address, and I'm going to be putting it in the Dogecoin testnet faucet, hoping that I'm going to be able to get some Dogecoin so that we can also continue this demo. So say I'm a human, I'm probably going to have to like accept some pictures of horses or bananas or something. So bear with me while I'm doing that. And I am a human, I swear. Is the sunflower a fruit? I don't know. It bears seeds, but seeds are not fruits. So I guess I'm not going to think too much about it. I'm a human. That's great. And then I'm going to send myself some Dogecoin. So I've sent myself 85 test Doge, and this is the transaction. So we're going to take a look at this transaction. It's currently unconfirmed. The balance here is not displaying live right now. But if you would want to have a feature where that balance could be displayed live, you could potentially use the cron job feature of MetaMask snaps to fetch that balance live every once in a while and then update it. Or you could just poll in your Dapp. You could poll the snaps API that gives you back the balance, and then see if your balance has been updated. The confirmation has arrived. The transaction has been confirmed. So hopefully, if I come here and I refresh this page, I will see that my Dogecoin wallet indeed has 85 Dogecoin test coins available for me to use and do whatever I want with. So let's test that. The faucet itself has an address that we can use to send any Dogecoin that we're not using back to it. So I'm gonna try to do that here by copy pasting the test address of that faucet. I'm gonna send 80 Doge, and I'm gonna click send. It's gonna take a little while to compute all the transaction inputs and so on that have to happen to do that. And before any of that, I'm gonna get a confirmation. So this is showing our custom UI, which I mentioned earlier, and it shows that it's coming from the snap. So the user can know that this is not a MetaMask. Well, it is a MetaMask UI, but that the data from it is coming from your snap, from the Dogecoin snap. And this is very important. You're probably not going to get audited successfully if you don't do these kinds of things. So it says, please confirm that you want to send 80 Doge to the following address. You can imagine there are opportunities here to use things like ENS or other protocols in order to transform this address to a name before you show it here. But this is the most basic way to really show that you care about your users and saying, hey, there's about to be something happening in the background. Make sure that you approve it. And when I click approve, I don't have any loading indicators right now here, but there's some things happening in the background. I promise. And the goal is that eventually I will get an output here in the UI that says, here's the latest transaction. And we'll be able to see that there was indeed a transaction, unconfirmed, albeit, that was broadcast on the Dogecoin network, where the input of this transaction is this address here, which is what was sent to me. And the output is the address of the faucet, which is going to receive 80 Doge tests. And because this Dogecoin protocol is based on Bitcoin, well, there's the concept of change. And so basically anything that I'm not paying as a fee to the miner, and anything that I'm not that I'm not sending to another address, to someone else, I'm choosing here to send it back to myself. So to my own address here that ends in 3H. Now, this is the most basic implementation of a Dogecoin wallet, which is based on only one address. If you want to go all out and maybe continue using this snap in order to improve your knowledge of MetaMask, of MetaMask snaps, I should say, then perhaps that would be a good opportunity here to just generate new addresses every time you make a transaction with the snap. And then you could use the state management, the data storage functionality of snaps in order to store all the data about the addresses that you've created, and so on and so on. Last thing for the demo, if I refresh this page, I'm going to see that it's not the last thing, actually. I want to show you one more thing. It's really important. So now my Dogecoin wallet has 5 Doge tests in its balance because I just sent 80 Doge. All right. The last thing I want to show you, I think it's really important. We do get that question very often from developers. What happens if the user were to uninstall the snap? So let's go to the settings and let's explore the snaps section. In there, we're going to see the Dogecoin snap. And remember, I mentioned that a snap is only installed once. But a snap is also connected. We're going to see the permissions here, and we're going to see the sites that are connected to the snap. So right here, localhost 8000 is connected to the snap. But what were to happen if I would completely remove the Dogecoin snap? if I remove the Dogecoin snap, one valid question that could come up is, did I just lose those 5 Doge that were still in that wallet at the time when I created the snap? I'm gonna let you think about that for a second while I have a sip of water. And then we're gonna reconnect to the snap and we're gonna see what the answer is. All right. I hope you've had a little bit of time to think about it. Let me just let me check in through the chat to see if there's anyone who answered something. All right. Well, there's a lot of things going on in the chat. So anyway, I hope I gave you a little bit of time to think about that. But let me reconnect to the snap. And it's going to ask me for the same permissions again because the snap is currently not installed. I'm going to give it access to my test networks. And we're going to see that when the snap is reinstalled, I have the same address and I have the same amount of Doge tests that I had when I uninstalled the snap. Why? Because all the work that the snap is doing is mostly stateless. The snap is asking to derive an address, a private key and then a public key and then an address. And the only source of truth for that is the secret recovery phrase of the user, which hasn't changed. So even if I uninstall the snap and reinstall it, I get back the same address because these addresses are derived deterministically based on the hierarchical deterministic wallets specification. And they're derived using the BIP44 scheme. So if I always derive the first account and the first address, then I'm always going to get the same address and I'm always going to get the same private keys. And so everything is going to work as we would expect it to work. If you're deriving multiple addresses based on, let's say, the hierarchical deterministic specification, and you're storing those inside, you're storing the addresses that you're deriving inside, let's say, the storage, the managed storage of the snap, then you won't have access to that managed storage. That being said, the hierarchical deterministic wallet specification specifies an algorithm that you can use in order to regenerate all the addresses when, let's say, a new wallet is initialized. So you initialize the address number 1, and you see that it has a balance or that it has some transactions that were associated to it. And then you keep generating addresses until there is no more addresses that that have had any transactions happening on them. And then you know that that was the last address that the user has generated for their wallet. So even that process is completely deterministic. It's still based on only the user's secret recovery phrase. And that means that as long as the user is keeping their recovery phrase, they actually have like a pretty real Dogecoin wallet now inside their MetaMask. And wait in a few months, like I don't know exactly how long, but in a few months, all that stuff that we see here in this Dapps UI, all of it is going to be here. I don't know exactly how it's going to look or when it's going to happen, but the accounts team is fiercely working so that there can be more integration and more like a better increased user experience and developer experience when you're adding these external protocols into MetaMask. So that's it for the demo. I hope you liked it. I'm going to uninstall the snap one more time because we're going to be building it together throughout the rest of this workshop. I can't guarantee that we're going to go all the way to the end of building it. I might be copy pasting some code to make it a little bit faster, because what I'd actually like to spend some time on during this workshop is not so much the specifics of building a Dogecoin wallet. You're probably not going to be building a Dogecoin wallet. You might be building a Bitcoin wallet or a Cosmos or some other protocol wallet. And the thing though is, as I was developing this workshop, what I mostly focused on, what I mostly concentrated on is what is common between whether you're developing a Bitcoin snap or a Dogecoin snap or whatever other protocol snap. There are some common things that you're going to be running into. And we're going to be going through them as we start writing some code and exploring the basics of creating a snap. So the snap is uninstalled. If I refresh this, we'll see that we're back to our initial state. But for now, I'm going to stop the development server that I'm using for this tutorial. And I'm going to create a new snap from scratch. So I'm going to go back to my dev folder. I'm going to show you how easy it is to get started creating a snap using our template that uses React and TypeScript in order to give you the basic building blocks that you need in order to create your snap. So it's as easy as creating a React application. All you have to do is just yarn create. Our creation package is called @MetaMask/snaps. And then the name of your snap. So where we're going to call it, we're going to call it non-EVM protocol snap. And then there's a bunch of things that are going to happen. Obviously, it's not snaps, it's snap. The gods of the workshops have been very kind with me so far. The demo went flawlessly. And I mean, I ran it before the workshop, but I'm still very happy about that. So I will forgive them this little flaw. And so this is going to download our template. It's going to install all the dependencies. It might take a minute or two. And while it's doing that, I want to show you a little bit what that template actually looks like. So we have a template that's hosted on GitHub. And you can actually use the template without using the command line tool that I gave you. But I would strongly suggest to use the command line tool instead, because we're going to be adding more features to it. For example, when you create a React app and you use the command line, you say yarn create React app, then you have options, for example, to create a TypeScript template or a JavaScript template, and so on and so on. And while right now our template that we give you for building snaps is fixed, there's some opportunities for us to use the CLI in order to modify the template that we give you based on what you're trying to build. If you're trying to build a protocol snap, we might give you a more specialized template. If you're trying to build a transaction inside snaps, which shows new UI inside of the MetaMask confirmation window, then we might give you a more appropriate starter code in order to do that. So I would strongly suggest to use the CLI instead of the template. It's currently finished building our snap. And the snap is going to be created in this non-EVM protocol snap directory, which I'm going to switch to right away. And then we are going to start. This is what I always like to do, whether if it's I'm joining a new organization or joining a new project in an organization or whatnot. If I'm going to be working on a code base and that code base is already existing, I'm going to start to explore a little bit my surroundings. I want to figure out a little bit what I have, what's been provided to me. And I'm going to help you with that. We're going to go through some of the code that's in here together. First off, you can see that we're using Yarn for this project. And we're going to recommend that you use Yarn, even if you're more used to using NPM. There's a lot of similarities between them. The learning curve should not be very hard. The second thing that you can see is that we're using packages. This is a feature from Yarn called Workspaces. And it allows us to be able to manage dependencies a little bit more easily. It allows us to run some commands inside these packages a little bit more straightforward way. And the first thing we see is that the template that we give you contains two packages. There's a site package and a snap package. So the snap package is going to be concerned with the code of the development of your snap, the code that runs inside the MetaMask secure sandbox. And the site package is the companion app that is going to allow you to connect to the snap and then interact with the snap, whatever it is that you're building. And if we dive a little bit deeper, we're going to be concentrating a lot on the snap package, but a little bit on the site package as well. If we dive a little bit deeper into the snap package, we're going to see that there's a bunch of familiar files there. Again, package.json. We have a testing suite that was built by one of the engineers that I work with on the Snaps team. That's very useful. It allows you to make sure that your snap is doing what you intended to do. And we have a source directory that contains the source code of your snap. And then we have one of the very important files of a snap, which we're going to be looking at a little bit later, which is the manifest. And the manifest is basically the source of truth for the metadata of your snap. So it's going to show you the proposed name of your snap that's going to appear in the UI when you're connecting to the snap. And it's going to show you here, you're going to be able to specify the initial permissions that you're requesting as part of the snap. So the basic snap that we gives you has these permissions. We're going to dive into them a little bit later. And finally, you have an source directory, like I said, with an index.ts file. And it's worth spending a little bit of time on that right now. The index.ts file is the file that MetaMask is going to look for to figure out how to interact with your snap on behalf of the user or on behalf of MetaMask itself. And the way that works, the way that you as a snap developer specify the logic of your snap and the capabilities of your snap, you do that by exporting some functions with some predetermined names that we give you. So if you want your snap to be able to provide an API that Dapps are going to be able to use to interact with it, then you have to export a function called onRPCRequest. If instead you're building a transaction inside Snap where you want to show some UI inside of the confirmation window, then you don't need an onRPCRequest function. You're going to be exporting another function, which we don't see here in the template. It's called onTransaction. And MetaMask is going to call that onTransaction function every time the user is about to make a transaction. You're going to get access to the transaction object, and you're going to be able to return a UI to fulfill the responsibilities of your snap. So everything here works through exports. This is how you define the capabilities of your snap. And even though in the template that we give you, it's quite short, there's only one function, and everything is inside an index.ts file, please feel free to not do that. Please feel free to modularize your code, use as many modules and directories and submodules as possible, and then you can just put it all together in this index.ts file, which is what's going to be looked at in order to determine the logic of your snap. So that's the basics here for the snap portion. And as far as the site portion, well, like I said, it's a Gatsby site, so that's based on React. And we do give you, again, some basic things like a Gatsby configuration, which you can feel free to change. You don't even have to use Gatsby. It's just if you want to get started quickly and focus on the snap, which is the most important part. And then there's just a bunch of components. We're going to be going through them a little bit as we work on the Dapps part of the workshop, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But inside of here somewhere is a logic that connects to the snap, that requests connection to the snap. So a lot more on that later. And then, so what I'm going to be doing next is I'm going to be going to my terminal. The yarn install command was already created for me. So that's why we have the node modules here. I don't need to run yarn install on this project. One thing that we're going to be making automatic in the next few weeks, which currently you have to do manually, is we initialize a Git repository for you, but we don't do the initial commit. So we have a task in our big to-do list in order to make that happen. But for now, I'm going to create an initial commit. And what that's going to do for me is it's going to allow me to really see the changes that I'm making. If I were to start diving into this code right away and making some changes, then I'm not going to know which are my changes and which are the changes brought about by just having installed this template. So I created this initial commit, and now if I change anything in the whole code, I'll know that it's coming from me. And then you can use any Git or GitHub workflow that you want in order to continue developing your snap. So that's the first thing that I want to do. And then the second thing that I want to do is I want to run my development servers. and that is servers plural. And I'm going to explain how to do it and why there are 2 servers. So I'm going to run yarn start here at the root of the project. And what that's going to do is it's basically going to fork out 2 yarn start commands. So this single yarn start is running yarn start in the site package and in the snap package. So if you're familiar with Gatsby, you might know that Gatsby is a static site generator. So if you're wondering why there's a server, it's because we're in development mode. So the Gatsby server, the Dapps server, is basically going to be presenting you like a React application, but it's going to have some nice development features like the ability to automatically refresh the user interface as you're making changes to your React code. Now, as far as the snap is concerned, when you're going to go to production with your snap is basically going to be a static JavaScript bundle that's going to live for now on NPM. We do have other distribution systems that we are talking about. Nothing has been settled yet, but you could very well imagine in the future that a snap could be published on IPFS, for example, instead of something centralized like NPM. And so wherever it's published, it's a static JavaScript bundle. And again, what the development server does here is it's simply watching for any changes that you make to your snap source code and rebundling that and making that available on another web server that's running at localhost 8080 at a URL called, I think, like dist/bundle.js. That's not very important, but that's the point is that you have this server so that you can more easily develop your snap and not have to manually recompile it every time. It would be like kind of like NodeMon for a Node.js app, except there's no server here. There's no server at the end of the day. So now that yarn start has run, I'm going to go back and go to localhost 8000 in my browser, and this is the initial template that we give you as far as the Dapp is concerned. So we're going to go through it really quickly. The basic code that we give you does not do much. There still seems to be an issue here with some I don't know if it's to do with some caching or anything like that. This says that it's still trying to connect to the Dogecoin snap, even though my development server is connecting to localhost 8000. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get rid of that. We had a similar issue in the other workshop that I did 2 days ago. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to manage my extensions, and I'm going to just reinstall the extension. I believe that there's probably some caching going on here inside the extension itself. So I'm just going to remove it, and I'm going to reinstall the extension, and hopefully everything will work well from that. I don't have any funds, so I'm creating a new wallet using a very secure password, which is not ABCD1234. And I'm gonna do that later because I don't plan to be doing anything serious with this wallet today. And now that the wallet has been reinstalled, I'm going to try again and hope that I get what I was expecting. Thank you. I accept everything. All right. So I click connect. The snap here is the Dapp is requesting to connect to a snap. And the ID of the snap says localhost 8080. It's a little bit confusing because the Dapp is running on localhost and the snap bundle server is running on localhost. But you can clearly see that there are different ports. And one thing that I might not have mentioned, or maybe I did, in production, your snap is going to be an NPM bundle. So what you will see here, instead of this localhost 8080, you're going to see that this Dapp is trying to connect to the snap, and here you're going to see the NPM ID of your snap instead of localhost. So I'm going to click connect, and we're going to see that this basic snap that we give you asks some different permissions. It still wants dialogue because it's a demo, so it's going to display a dialogue just to show how that works. And it needs to allow websites to communicate with the Snap. Why? Because we're going to trigger this dialog, which can only be triggered from a Snap. We're going to trigger it by calling an API function of the Snap. And we're going to call that by clicking the send message button from the Dapp. So when I click install, the Snap is installed. And now I can click the send message button here. What's going to happen when I do that? The send message is going to be, the code behind that is going to be happening inside of a Dapp. And a Dapp has access to the window.ethereum provider. So as part of Snaps, window.ethereum has a new function, a new method inside of it, in addition to all the other methods that you're used to, like like personal sign or like any other of the Ethereum provider methods that you might be using. There's a new method through Flask right now called invoke snap. So when I click this, it's going to basically be window.ethereum.request, and then the method is going to be wallet invoke snap. It's going to have the ID of the snap and the RPC method that we want to call from the snap. And what the snap system is going to do is it's going to check first, okay, do we have a snap? Yes, we have a snap. Does this snap have an on RPC request method? Yes, it does. And so basically it's going to be forwarding the invoke snap request from the Dapp directly into that on RPC request method. You're going to get the origin, which is the URL of the Dapp. If you want to do some checking, you're going to get the request object, and that request object itself has its own method. And here we have a basic hello method that just displays a dialog, just as a demo. So if I click send message, then we're going to get a dialog. And this dialog that popped up here is a result of code that is running inside your Snap. The Snap checks that it's received the hello method request, and then it calls out to another provider, the Snap provider, and it requests to pop up a dialog, a confirmation dialog. And the content of that dialog is created using our custom UI components. There's panels, there's headings, there's text, and we're working on a lot more components. And this output here of the snap.request snap dialog method is what we see here inside the Dapps UI, inside the browser UI. And you can see here that this part here is in bold. You can see that even though this custom UI may not be extremely powerful today, there is a little bit of markdown features that you can use. So you can make some parts in bold. You can use emojis, and you can use some dividers, some headings, and we're working on a lot more features. And then finally, if you approve the dialog, well, nothing much is going to happen, because that's the end of the source code inside this snap that we give you. One thing that might be worth exploring here is, as a developer, I like to use console log all the time. Actually, as I was developing this snap, there was a point where I really couldn't figure out where the failure was happening, and I was literally like putting console logs between every line. So if I were to put a console log here, let's say that we want to see what's the request object is made of, and I would say console log received request from Snap, from that. And then maybe I want to display the origin, and I want to display the request. So I've just made a change to my Snap, by the way. And as of now, this newly compiled, bundled Snap is not installed in my UI. So I really have to do reconnect here. Even though the permissions are the same, the code of the Snap has changed. So I have to reconnect and reinstall the Snap. And if I were to open my developer tools and click on the send message button, I would expect to see a console log. So I'm going to click send message. We're going to see that this UI has appeared again, but that there's no console log. And I'm going to give you another 30 seconds while I drink a little bit more water to try to think why that console log did not appear. Maybe it's the gods of the workshop, but there is another reason. So cheers to you, and we'll be back in 20 seconds. All right. So the reason why the console log did not appear is not because of the gods of the workshop. It's because this console log that I wrote here is part of the snap code. And the snap code is not running in here. The snap code is running, as we said, inside the MetaMask extension, which I'm going to pin here for easier access. And so the console log is going to appear as part of the extension's output. And how do I look at the extension's output? Thankfully, it's quite simple. I'm going to right-click on the MetaMask Flask icon here. I'm going to go to Manage Extension. I'm going to make sure that the developer mode here is enabled on the top right-hand side. And then I'm going to inspect the view that corresponds to the extension. So I'm going to click on HTML. And then I'm going to see that there's already some output here, which I'm going to clear. And I'm going to go back here. And I'm going to rerun that same send hello message one more time. I'm going to click approve. And then I'm going to go back to the to my extensions developer tools. And we're going to see that indeed, if I look at what console log I put here, I said received request from Dapps. And so we should see that console log somewhere here. And okay, I feel like we don't see it. So the gods of the workshops might still be doing their work. But I promise you that this is where the console logs should appear. So let's try to figure out if I made a mistake here. I did have a console log. I saved the file. The content of the snap has been rebundled. Actually, one thing that I just like doing from time to time is just looking at the bundle. It's right here in the bundle.js of the dist directory. And I'm going to just make sure that that text is inside the bundle, and it is. And so I'm not sure why my output is not appearing here, but we're going to try one more time. Let's just refresh this for good luck. I'm going to try to reconnect to the snap. And I'm going to click on install one more time. I'm going to hope that it works this time around. So let's click on the send message button. And let's click approve. And oh, here it is. My bad. I was trying to look at the beginning of the line. Okay. All right. You can have many snaps installed in your MetaMask. And so my console log has been prefixed by this string here, which is very important actually, because it allows me to see which, where does this console log is coming from. If I had 5 snaps installed, it might not be straightforward. And so this is actually our console log, but it's just prefixed with the ID of the snap. So everything works as expected. And as you're debugging your snap, you're going to want to make sure to have that window open so that you can see not just your console logs, but also any potential errors or exceptions that are being thrown as you are developing your snap. So this is the origin, and this is the request. You can see that it has a method, and it can have optional parameters, which we are not using here. All right. So that's what you get when you get started working with the template. So from now on, all the things that we're going to be doing throughout the rest of the workshop, we have about 30 minutes left, is to explore some things that can be happening as you are developing something as complex as a protocol snap. I am gonna take a minute to go to this window here to our virtual workspace and see if there are again any questions. Yes, there will be a marketplace. The marketplace is going to launch at the same time as the production launch of MetaMask, which, like I said earlier, is currently the current date that we have in mind is the beginning of September. Do we give the snap access to the private keys? Yes, we do give the snap access to the private keys. One question that I had a few weeks ago that was very valid is, why don't we keep MetaMask, like why don't we keep the actual MetaMask extension in control of the private keys and then just require it to sign on our behalf? And the truth is, there's so many different signing protocols. There's so many different ways to hash and sign a transaction and so on, that would be similar to us like implementing everything inside of MetaMask, which is what we're trying to not do with Snaps. And so yes, we give you access to private keys so that you can implement your own signing protocol, your own transaction formats, whatever it is that your protocol requires, because there's no way that we could be implementing all of those things in-house. There's MPC, there's so many different ways to hash a transaction that we have to give you access to those private keys, and we don't give you access to the secret recovery phrase of the user. Okay, the way that we give you access to private keys is you request them per protocol. So earlier, as we saw when I was doing the demo, our Snap is requesting access to testnet coins, and so it's not going to be able to derive Bitcoin keys. If I were to request access to the coin type number 0, which is for Bitcoin, then the UI would show, hey, this Snap wants to control your Bitcoin. And then you might want to have a different security protocol. You might want to do some more vouching and more checking and so on and so on. So in this case, will there be any schema for that? Well, no, because the Snap code is just custom code, you know? So if your signing is based on the XYZ signature scheme or whatever, which I just made up, then you can just install an NPM package for XYZ signing. Oh, what do you mean? Okay. This is the last question because I'd like to move forward with some more workshop stuff, but let's see if we can resolve it. When I will be in the future deploying my snaps for the general public? Yes. Oh, will there be a mechanism to sign it that this is genuine, that the snap is coming from me? That's a good question. I don't think there's anything for that today. Now, if you publish the snap, currently the only publishing mechanism of snaps is on NPM. So the one thing that could give that additional trust is that you could publish it under your organization on NPM, and then that could help. But I think that your request is extremely important, right? Like if you have some kind of like if you have some kind of key that you want to use to say that yes, this snap is mine, and you want to sign that, then I think that could be really interesting. So your question and your request did not fall on deaf ears, and please feel free to connect with me again on Telegram, and I'll go back to the engineering team with that, and we'll see if we can give you some more details on that. Thank you very much for the question. That's really useful and interesting question. All right, so let's keep going. Now, if we jump to the workshop itself, the Dogecoin Snap workshop, you're going to see that, like I said earlier, I really gave you like step-by-step instructions in order to create the snap, right? So everything that we did so far, like yarn create, starting the development servers, making sure that everything works, doing all the troubleshooting. I've just basically been following those steps as they are in here. And now we're going to start diving into to start modifying the code that was provided to you as part of the initial template. So I'm going to do that simply by following my own workshop here in GitHub. And that's going to give you hopefully some increased confidence that, like I said earlier, that you don't have to, to follow along step by step, and that you can simply have the confidence that you're going to be able to do all these steps before. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to be adjusting the manifest file, which contains one of the most important things of your snap, which is the permissions. Our snap that we're building requires different permissions than the template snap. It still requires a dialog to display dialogues because we want to display confirmations to the user. It requires an RPC permission. This is what allows the Dapp that we saw earlier in the demo to connect to the snap, ask it to sign transaction, ask it for balances, and so on in a secure way. It requires another permission called endowment network access. So your Snap's code runs in a very secure sandbox, and by default, it cannot do fetch. So this permission here is basically the ability to do fetch inside of your Snap and to call external APIs. And it requires a last permission, that's the most important one, which is called the snap_get BIP44 entropy permission. This is going to allow your Snap to call this function, and only for coin type number 1, which is the coin type for test networks. The coin type for Ethereum is 60, the coin type for Bitcoin I think is 0, and so on and so on. Every protocol has its coin type. There's like an improvement proposal for that you can refer to. You probably know the protocol, the coin type of your own protocol. And so this is how this is specified. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this and paste it inside the snap.manifest.json, which is located inside the snap directory at the root of the snaps directory. I'm going to just change those permissions right here. And I'm going to save this. I think I might have done a little bit too much. Oh yeah, it's not permissions, so I don't need this. I don't need this. And I need a comma here. So these are the snaps permissions. And as I save this, you notice that the bundle has not rebundled. But because I added new permissions, we need to rebundle. One of the things, it's not a direct answer to the question that was just asked to me earlier about like verifying the who wrote this snap, but there is a SHA-SUM which corresponds to the the content of the bundle as well as as some of the fields inside the manifest. So if I were to try to reinstall this snap now to look at the new permissions, then we would see that there's going to be an error because the SHA-SUM does not correspond to what is in the manifest. And so one little trick that I use for doing that is I just go back to my index.ts for my snap, and you can just save it again. And if you save it, that's going to rebundle everything using our bundling server. And the SHA-SUM is going to be updated. And then I'm going to reconnect the snap, and we're going to see that now this snap is requesting some new permissions that we saw earlier, the testnet permissions and so on and so on. Even though we're not using them right now, we just gone through the first step of re-requesting those permissions. All right, so what's next? We're going to keep following throughout the workshop. By the way, every permission is explained in our permissions reference, which is in our documentation here. We have quite thorough documentation, but we know that it's not perfect. And like I said earlier, we're still and really grateful of any feedback that you can give us regarding our permissions. All right. So next step, our snap is not going to, we're not going to write all the code of our snap. I'm not going to re-implement Bitcoin transaction creation and hashing and signing and so on. And so I'm going to have to install some dependencies inside of my snap directory. And as they're installing, I'm going to rerun that inside Tmux so I can have multiple windows easily. As those permissions are installing, I'm going to talk a little bit about something really important here. So one of the libraries that I'm using to create this Dogecoin snap is the Bitcoin.js library, because Dogecoin is based on Bitcoin. But you might notice that I'm using a specific version of the library, which is the major version 5. If you were to go look today, you would see that Bitcoin.js lib is at version 6. And unfortunately, and these are things that we're still working on today because our developer experience is extremely important. Your developer experience is extremely important to us. I had to use a previous major version of the Bitcoin.js library because unfortunately, as of today, the Bitcoin JS library, the last version, version 6, is not playing well with the bundler that we're using to bundle your snap code, which is browserified. So one of the things that one of my colleagues is working on today is to give you access to use different bundlers easily. So we're working on allowing you to use Webpack as a bundler, which is a lot more modern. It's still much more in development. But as of right now, I've had to make these concessions of using an older version of a library, not because it's better, but because it's the latest one that I found that was working within the Snap's development environment. So this is very important that you be mindful of that as you're developing your Snap. And it's going to get better. It's going to get better very soon, and it's going to get even better as we keep developing Snaps. That's one of the most important things for us. We want to enable you to have the best experience while you're developing Snaps. So again, any feedback on that, reach out to me, use our Discord. We want to hear from you because that's our main goal. We want to help you to build the best snaps possible with the best developer experience possible. All right, so now our libraries should be installed. That's great. There have been some errors along the way, but I think they might have to do with compiling some packages. But I trust if I look here that the libraries, despite these errors, have been installed. If I look here, I should still see the Bitcoin JS library in my node modules. So I'm going to keep moving forward. We don't have a lot of time left. So the next step, this package that I created, this snap that I created, is using a publicly available API in order to allow me to communicate to the Dogecoin network, whether that is for fetching transactions, fetching, submitting new transactions, and so on and so on. So I already have an API key, but while we go through this, I want to mention some things about API keys. Okay, so the API key is ideally you wouldn't want to put it straight out in your code, right? Even though at the end of the day, your Snaps bundle, which is hosted on npm, is going to contain that API key. I don't like to have API keys in my source code, and so how do we do that? Well, we give you access to some environment variables that you can use in your Snap. And even though they're not traditional environment variables, you can't really think of them as secrets so much. It makes it a little bit easier to manage things like keys and names that could be different between a development and a production environment. And so the way to do that is actually what's more interesting than the setup itself. So how are we going to do that? Well, we are going to create a .env file here in the snap directory. And in this .env file, we're going to be using we're going to be putting an API key that's going to be coming from that API that we are using. So once we've done that, we actually need to specify another, we need to customize the bundler that we're giving you, which is currently Browserify, to be able to load environment variables. And the environment variable that we're going to be using in our code is this, it's called Tatum API key, which is the API that we're using to communicate with the Dogecoin protocol. So I'm going to simply copy that code here into the snapconfig.json, which is the file that allows you to customize, among other things, the bundle that we give you. So I'm just going to copy it, and we can see that this allows the transformation of the bundle and the replacement of this this API key with an actual variable coming from the environment. So how do I set up that API key? Well, in my case, I am going to use the same API key that I've been using. And once you're going to go through your own version of the workshop at home, then you're just going to be signing up for the API, or maybe you're using your own protocol and you're going to be using your own API key. And so I'm just going to go in my env file. I'm going to copy my API key from here so that we can move forward. You'll notice that the env file is not committed to Git. That's extremely important. So I'm going to reopen the workshop, which will be at the state where we left it. And I'm going to go into the end file, and I'm just going to write basically API key equals this API key. It's a testnet API key. I don't care if you use it or not. It has a limited amount of API requests, but you can get one for free. So go ahead and do that if you want to follow this workshop. And so this API key, then we're going to be using it as part of our source code. And what do we do from there? Well, let's keep going. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new file in our source code, and this is part of what I said earlier about modularizing your source code. We're not shoving everything inside the index.ts. So I'm going to go in my snap directory in the source. I'm going to create a file. I'm going to call it datamconfig.js, and then I'm just going to copy this so that I'm exporting my API key, and so that the whole code of my snap is not littered with process.env everywhere, right? I'm going to make sure that the configuration is just all nicely tucked into a single file right here. And then we can keep moving forward, and now our snap has access to an API key. I do want to mention one more thing. Like I said, this API key is still going to be in your bundle. So if you don't want to do that, if you want maybe to have like each user have their own API key or something, you can implement a more complex scheme where there's no API keys anywhere, whether it's in the code, in environment variables, and in the bundle. As an example, you could have users sign in to your own protocol using OAuth or using sign in with Ethereum or something like that. And when they've signed in successfully, you can maybe have like a paid scheme in there, when they sign in, and then when they do sign in, you can get your server could return a key, and then you can store that key inside the snap by calling by calling a method. By calling a method of the snap that would be doing that. And we do have a tutorial on that that's available on my GitHub, which is shared at the end of the workshop instructions that we're currently following. So I think it's the second one. That's it. So we're back where we were. Okay, so we installed our dependencies. We've done this step of adjusting the configuration to have access to an environment. And so what's the next step that we're going to do? Well, now we have all the dependencies installed. We have access to an API. So let's start deriving users' accounts or addresses, I should say. So how are we going to do that? Well, again, we're working in a very modular way. So I'm putting all that logic inside of a file called privatekey.ts. And I'm going to just copy paste the code here, and we're going to briefly go through it. This is some important code because it calls out to a Snap APIs. And so what this code is doing is exporting a function called getAccount. And that function is calling out to the Snap API that we requested earlier. So we requested a permission called snap get bit44 entropy for coin type number 1. If I were to change that to coin type, let's say 0 here, this would fail because my snap does not have the permission for that. And so this module now that we've created has a function that allows us to get the account. It's actually deriving a full BIP44 node here, which has the private key inside of it. It's able to have the public key, and through it, we can generate a Dogecoin address. So it is very important to take care of this data that's here in a safe and secure way. And you can bet that once you audit your snap, this is going to be audited very carefully to make sure that this is not leaked anywhere, like through the network or anything as you're developing your snap. All right. So now the next step is to implement the APIs. Obviously, this is going to be very important, very different depending on the protocol that you're developing. We're not going to be implementing the same APIs, whether we're building Dogecoin or Bitcoin or Cosmos or any other type of protocols. So I'm not necessarily going to go through a lot here. I'm going to be doing quite a bit of copy pasting. I like to make sure that I have some good types. So I'm going to create a new file called tatumtypes.ts, which contains all the types that are coming back as a result of calling the Tatum API. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about something here. So as I was developing this snap, I noticed that this Tatum, this provider, have their own npm package that already has everything. It has an API client that's typed with TypeScript and everything. And I actually spent quite a bit of time trying to get this client to work within the confines of the MetaMask Snaps sandbox. And I gave up at some point. I said I just there was too many things that weren't working, and I didn't want to spend too much time on it. And so I basically decided to create my own client because just needed access to a few functions. And so I created my own client. I kind of like derived the types from the responses that I was getting. And so this code here, normally I wouldn't have to write it. I could just be able to use the library of whatever provider I'm wanting to use. But like I said, Snaps is running in a very special environment, which can be quite limited. And while there are ways to fix that are detailed in our documentation, I decided that my time was better spent elsewhere, and I just went ahead and created my own little client. So I'm going to copy paste the code of the client here. This is the client that allows me to talk to the API. And we can spend a bit of time looking at those functions here. There's a generic functions that calls out to the API using the API key. And then I created specific functions to support all the work that I needed to do in order to allow you to broadcast transactions, sign transactions, and so on, get the balance for an address, just calling out that API, get a transaction by its hash, and so on and so on. And then the most complex ones are going to be in the RPC API, so which we're going to look at in a second. So again, this is very specific to your protocol, and the goal of the workshop here is more to show you like the generic things that can arise as you're building a protocol. So that's why I'm not spending too much time on that. And then the last step is creating the RPC API for the snap. Again, you'll notice that I'm not shoving all of that in an index.ts file. I want to be modularized. So first I have some types that are needed in my case. So there's some types that are required when making a transaction. I want to make sure that the to address is a string, that the amount in Satoshi or in Dojoshi or whatever the base currency of Dogecoin is. And I'm putting all of that in a types.ts file. So again, this is very specific to the protocol, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, just copy pasting it. And finally, I have some constants that I'm using, like so that I don't have to keep putting magic numbers into my code. And those are in a constants.ts file. So constants.ts, and here they are. And then I have the core of my snap, which is the RPC API that it exposes. And again, this is very specific to the snap. There's a lot of code in here. We're not necessarily going to go through it. But the way that I designed this, which I really like, is that every function that is being exported in this RPC file corresponds to one thing that I want to do with my snap. So what are the exports that we have here? Get address. This is what then the UI is going to use to get the address. Make a transaction. There's a get balance somewhere in there. And everything is well commented in case you're curious about the little details. But basically here we're building a Dogecoin transaction, and then we're hashing it, and then we're broadcasting it, and then we get back the transaction response. And that's what allowed the Dapp that we saw in the demo earlier to be able to display the hash of the transaction and link out to a block explorer, allowing you to see the transaction. I also created some types. Unfortunately, we're kind of running out of time here, but I created like this like magic type thing, which is going to be able to be used by the Dapp in order to, because the Dapp and the snap are disconnected, but I still wanted to have some form of type safety here. And so I created this RPC types, which you can feel free to inspire yourself from or reuse, so that you can have some type safety even as you're building the Dapp. Which is going to show you what are the inputs and the outputs of those RPC methods that the snap provides. And the last step is modifying our index.ts, which is the one that the bundler or that the snap system is actually using in order to know what your snap is doing. And so you can see now, because I did everything in a modularized way, that this index.ts file, which we already explored earlier, is basically very simple. It implements the onRPC request method, which we saw earlier, and it's just basically testing. If you call the get address or get transaction or get balance function, and it's just basically calling out to this RPC module that we looked at earlier. One thing of interest here, you can name these methods however you like, but these methods are going to be invoked by Dapps calling your snap. And you want to kind of have a little bit of a namespace here to make sure that it doesn't clash with other snaps or other protocols. And so I decided to prefix all my methods with Doge underscore here to make sure that I'm being as unique as possible. So we're going to modify the index.ts file here. We're going to see that almost everything is working. I don't know why it can't find the RPC types module. Because I called it RCP types, all right, but thank you, now it's working. And obviously there's sometimes the TypeScript server is a little bit behind, but if I were to redo that, then it would be working. And then we basically like just put all of the snap together. We don't have a lot of time left. The rest of the workshop is quite interesting still because it's concerned with implementing the DApp part. And even though we already give you quite a lot of code inside the template, I've gone a little bit all out here and created some React hooks that make it easier to display balances and addresses and to do transactions. And like I said, at the end of the workshop, there are a lot of resources, like our Discord, like a lot of interesting resources, some links to my Twitter and my Telegram. And again, github.com/ziadsab. Dogecoin Snap is pinned up there. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to try to see if there are some questions that I can answer within the few minutes that we have left. Oh, I'm being told that I can still take a few minutes because Emily is still not here. Okay, how much time should I get? How much time do I have to do what I want to do?
Actually, Emily just joined the space earlier, so
Yeah,
yeah. But no worries, you still have a
she's
couple of
gonna.
minutes.
Yeah, so she's gonna get started at the expected time, but okay. Well, I
Yeah.
still don't see any questions in the chat here.
I'm not
I
sure
feel
if you
like,
yeah, sorry.
yeah, tell
I'm
me.
not sure if you answered this question earlier, but someone asked they can use superior versions of .js 16.0.
Yes, I'm pretty sure you can try using 18. Actually, I mean, let's check what I am using. I think, yeah, like what? No, that's not correct. It can't be I can't be using version 8. Did I do something wrong here? I don't know. I'm certainly not using version 8. Yeah, I'm using 16, but I'm pretty sure you can use 18. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to use 18. I think it's more like at least use version 16. Okay, other questions? Feel free to post in the chat. There's 1 minute left.
Yeah. There was another question, and the question was, in the future, will there be any public marketplace or store for snaps?
Yep, I already answered that, and I'll say it again. The answer is yes. When we launch Snaps, which is currently in the first week or two of September, at the same time as launching Snaps, there will be a marketplace. It's not being built. It's not being built by us. It's being built by a third party with a grant, but there will be a marketplace for sure. As I'm answering those questions, I'm gonna also feel free to put my GitHub and my Twitter and Telegram here. And were there any other questions?
Yeah. Gregor has just posted one question in the chat. Can you see it?
I'm gonna look back. Why did you decide to start with us developing extensions where there are no clear guidelines how to publish our snaps in a safe and transparent way. Safe and transparent environment for snaps, and then start developing extensions. I'm not sure what you mean by publishing our snap in a safe and transparent way. The current publishing process is happening through NPM, and when you publish your snap on NPM with a specific version, then a Dapp is requesting that specific version to be installed, and the source code of that, in addition to the SHA-SUM of the snap, is being audited. So I believe that provides a little bit of safety and clarity as to what it is that you're actually installing, and that if you don't believe in the audit, you can go audit the code yourself. The idea of the snap, as I see it, is to give the user convenience. Yes, that's correct. I believe that we're running a little bit out of time. Here's what I would propose to you, Gregor, and I'm really appreciating your questions, and I really appreciate all the other questions. Tag me on Twitter. Ask me the question, tag me on Twitter, and then we'll be able to have a much longer conversation that will be no Twitter. Okay. Reach out to me on Telegram or whatever you want, and then let's keep talking about that. I want to keep that conversation going. Your feedback is so important to us. Because I want to make sure that I leave the stage to Emily to start her workshop out of respect to her and all the other attendees that are here. I'm going to simply end by saying that I'm very grateful for everyone that was here that attended the workshop. I hope that it got you excited. I mean, adding Dogecoin inside snaps means that you can add Bitcoin inside snaps and a lot of other protocols. And I want to say welcome, Emily, and good luck on your workshop. And I'm going to be out, but you know how to reach me. So have a beautiful day wherever you are in the world. Thank you for attending, and see you later.